Once upon a time, in a very small village, lived a poor beggar who sat on the lonely path that led to the village stream. He was blind and popularly known as Arja, the village beggar. Whenever the villagers walked past him, they dropped some money in his bowl. Everyone knew Arja, and the people were very generous to him. Some even made it a duty to provide food for him, and Arja was so grateful to them for their generosity. However, no one knew where Arja had come from, or if he was an indigena of their village. All they knew was that he was a blind beggar who sat close to the village stream. One evening, a girl named Somto was returning home from the stream when she came across Arja lying by the corner of the bush, asleep. She looked into his money bowl and saw some money. Somto snuck quietly toward Arja and stole his money bowl, ensuring not make a sound. As she was about to leave with the money, Arja disappeared before her eyes, filling her with terror. She stood there frozen and began to plead with Arja to return and take his money, but Arja never returned. Confused about what to do, Somto threw the money to the ground and ran home like one who was being chased by a ghost. She locked herself up in her room and wondered who Arja was and what he would do to her for stealing from him. Just as she sat on her bed, lost in her own thoughts, her legs began to itch. Somto rubbed them for a few minutes and noticed that the itching was now getting worse. She took an ointment and applied it on her legs, relieving the itch. After a few hours, Somto went to bed, still thinking about Arja and the trouble she might have gotten herself into. Later that night, she woke up to realize that her legs had transformed into those of a goat. Somto screamed at the top of her voice, waking her father, who came into her room and was confronted by the horrific sight. He opened his eyes in shock as he stared blankly at his daughter's goat legs. "How did this happen?" Somto's father, Mazi Chukwuka, asked. Somto, although terrified, told him a completely different story. She narrated that Arja begged her for some money that evening on her way back from the stream, and when she failed to give him money, he became so agitated and began to curse her. Before she knew what was happening, he disappeared before her eyes, leaving her frightened by the bush path. She ran home and went to bed, only to wake up now and realize that her legs had transformed into those of a goat. Mazi Chukwuka flared up in anger and decided to head out the next morning to confront Arja. When he arrived at the spot where Arja usually sat to beg, he met no one there and waited patiently for hours, hoping that Arja would show up to beg as he usually did, but Arja never showed up. This did not look good, and Mazi Chukwuka began to think of what to do. He returned home and met his daughter Somto in so much pain. Her cries pierced through his heart as he rushed her to the hut of his friend, Ojukwu, the village healer. Ojukwu had never seen anything like it before and tried all he could to heal the legs, but failed. He advised Mazi Chukwuka to take his daughter to another powerful healer who lived close to the village mountains. They arrived at the healer's hut, and she too was unable to heal her legs. Mazi Chukwuka took his daughter to many healers, who were all unable to transform his daughter's goat legs. By this time, the news had spread around the village, and the people were terrified to know that Arja the beggar was responsible for the calamity. They began to troop in numbers to catch a glimpse of Somto's legs, as no one had ever seen a human with animal legs before. Weeks turned into months, and Somto was now bedridden as the legs were too painful for her to walk. Her father, seeing that none of the healers had been able to heal his daughter's legs, decided to pay a visit to a popular seer in the village to see if she could find Arja and tell him where he was. The seer revealed to him that Arja was no ordinary beggar. She said that Arja came to their village on a mission and was angered by Somto, who tried to steal from him. Mazi Chukwuka looked shocked to hear this, as he realized that his daughter Somto had lied to him. The seer told him that if nothing was done soon, Somto's entire body would transform into that of a goat. Terrified of the revelation, Mazi Chukwuka asked the seer what he could do. The seer told him that his daughter Somto had to successfully complete Aja's mission in their village to gain his forgiveness and be free. He asked what the mission was, and the seer told him it was up to his daughter Somto to find out. Mazi Chukwuka returned home and confronted Somto about her lies, threatening to disown her if she refused to tell him the truth. Knowing how strict her father could be, Somto decided to tell the truth. She narrated how she tried to steal from Aja and how he disappeared before her eyes. Mazi Chukwuka could not believe that his daughter Somto tried to steal from a poor blind beggar. He had always provided all her needs and wondered why she had to go about stealing from others. This was not the first time that Somto was stealing, but her parents, especially her mother, paid little or no attention to this. A few years ago, a young woman came to their home to see Somto's mother, saying that Somto stole some items from her market stall. Instead of Somto's mother cautioning her daughter and showing her disapproval of the act, she dismissed the woman and defended Somto, claiming her daughter could do no such thing. This negligence only encouraged Somto's behaviour, leading to the predicament they now faced. Realising the severity of the situation, Somto decided to return to the place where it all began, to the exact spot where Aja sat to beg for money. She made up her mind to sit there and wait, hoping to understand Aja's mission in their village. She sat there patiently for hours and watched as the villagers walked past her in shock. They gossiped and even pointed at her goat legs, wondering what she could have done to be punished in such a miserable way. Some even asked themselves if it meant that her family had abandoned her, as they shook their heads in pity and walked past her. Somto sat there for hours but noticed nothing unusual. After a few hours, when it was almost getting dark, she returned home and could not help but remember how the villagers treated her. This moved her to tears, as she dreaded returning there the next day. However, knowing that this was the only way she would secure her freedom, she returned the next day, not minding what the people had to say. As she sat there all alone, two girls from the village approached her and began to mock her goat legs. They told her how ridiculous she looked and even went further to bleat like a goat as they laughed out loud and walked away. This broke Somto, who cried her eyes out and wished that she could disappear. The next day, however, despite all that had happened, Somto still showed up at the spot again. She paid no mind to the villagers or what they had to say. A few hours later, heavy rain began to fall, and Somto made her way to a small hut close to the village stream to seek shelter from the rain. To her greatest surprise, she met a very old woman who lived alone in the hut. Somto had always seen the hut whenever she went to the stream to fetch some water, but never knew that someone lived in it because it looked deserted. She approached the old woman and noticed that she was sick. So Somto decided to take good care of her by tidying up her hut and preparing a meal for her to eat. The old woman was so grateful to Somto and thanked her for her kindness. Once the rain subsided, Somto returned home, happy to have helped the helpless woman. The next morning, Somto returned to her usual spot again. She sat there for hours and saw a young boy who was heading to the stream to fetch some water. He looked so sad and distressed, and Somto could not help but ask what the problem was. "Is everything okay with you?" she asked the little boy, who burst out in tears in front of her. Somto felt sorry for him and pressed to know what the problem was. The little boy narrated to her how he was suffering at the hands of his stepmother. His father had died a few years ago, leaving him all alone with his wicked stepmother, who hated him so much and poured out her frustration on him. His stepmother blamed him for the death of his father and did everything to make his life miserable. Somto then asked about his mother, and the little boy revealed to her that his mother abandoned him with his father after he was born. Somto's heart was so heavy to hear this. She comforted the boy and promised to help him in any way that she could. She gave him some food to eat and the young boy was so delighted to finally eat some food after days of being starved. Once he was done eating, Somto promised to find a permanent solution to his problem. She also promised to bring him food every day, and the young boy was so delighted and thanked her for her kindness. Somto returned home that evening and could not stop thinking about the young boy and how she could help him out of his predicament. She thought deeply and hard and decided to go in search of his mother. Somto knew that the little boy would be better off living with his own mother than suffering at the hands of a woman who lacked compassion for him. However, she had no idea how she would be able to find his mother, but hoped to get some information from him that would be helpful. The next morning, the little boy stopped by again, and Somto asked if he knew any details about his mother. The boy gave her a bracelet that his mother wore on his wrist before she left. Somto took the bracelet from the boy, hoping that it would help her find his mother. She returned home that evening and met a very powerful woman in her home. Her father, Mazi Chukwuka, had travelled to a distant village to bring the powerful woman to see if she would be able to break the curse that was placed on his daughter. The woman, on sighting Somto, revealed that she had the power to reverse the curse. She told Somto to stretch forth her hand, and immediately Somto stretched her hand towards her. The woman froze in shock. "Where did you get this from?" she asked Somto, as she pointed towards the bracelet in her hand. Somto looked at her, confused, and said that she got it from a little boy who lived in their village. The woman insisted on meeting the boy, and Somto asked why that was. The woman revealed to her that the boy was her son. She told Somto that she gave birth a few years ago and was so excited to be a mother. This was before she accepted her calling as a priestess. However, her family knew that she would not accept her calling as a priestess if her baby was still there with her. So they connived and sent her baby away to a faraway place, to a person that she never knew, shielding him under a very powerful spell that made it impossible for her to find him, even with her powers. She searched and searched and searched, but couldn't find her son anywhere, and all efforts to make her family reveal his location to her failed, as everyone swore never to divulge the information to her. She told Somto that immediately after she gave birth to her son, she wore the special bracelet on his wrist, and Somto could not believe her ears as she took the powerful woman to the hut where the little boy lived with his stepmother. When they arrived, they heard a scream and noticed that his wicked stepmother was beating him up mercilessly. This angered his mother, the powerful woman who stormed the hut and turned the wicked woman into a goat. Immediately the wicked woman transformed into a goat, and Somto realized that her legs had returned to normal. The curse had been reversed and Somto could not contain her joy. It was then that Somto realized that saving the little boy was Arja's mission in their village. What she did not know was that Arja was the spirit of the boy's father, who had been watching over him all the while, hoping to find someone who would help his son out of his predicament. Somto, now free from the curse, watched as the priestess embraced her son for the very first time. Her heart was so full of joy for being able to play a part in reuniting the little boy with his mother. The priestess thanked Somto for leading her to her son as she headed out of the village, happily with him. Somto returned home delighted at how everything played out. Her heart was gladdened to know that the little boy's suffering was finally over. She also learned her lesson never to steal again, and from that day on, she changed and became a better version of herself. The lesson to be learned from this story is that every action has its consequences. Never take that which belongs to another, because the repercussions may be severe and unexpected. Failing to address bad behaviour can lead to severe consequences. Therefore, it is important to guide and correct those we care about to prevent them from falling into greater trouble. Also, keep in mind that honesty and integrity are crucial virtues that must be upheld at all times. We should also learn to be truthful and take responsibility for our actions because lying and deceit can lead us into greater trouble and suffering.